Hey guys, and welcome back to the Midlife Awakening. This is a podcast about transformation for women who are waking up to who they really are while navigating everything that comes with midlife. I'm so glad that you're here. Today on the Midlife Awakening, I'm joined by the incredible Mia Von Scha. Mia is an experienced child therapist, trauma specialist, and therapeutic play expert with over 15 years of experience supporting families across the UK, South Africa, and internationally. She holds a master's in integrative counseling and psychotherapy for children, adolescents, and families, and is highly trained in therapeutic modalities including EMDR, NLP, hypnotherapy, and child-accelerated trauma treatments. Mia is the founder of Transformational Parenting and one of the directors of Origami Wings, CIC, where she helps families heal and grow through trauma-informed support. Her approach is grounded in the latest research on attachment theory, child development, and resilience. But what really stands out is her warm, compassionate style that makes people feel safe and understood. I wanted to bring Mia onto the show because so many of us, as we reach perimenopause, find that we can no longer ignore the past. Old wounds and unresolved childhood trauma rise to the surface, and it can feel overwhelming. But as Mia reminds us, this is also an opportunity, a chance to heal ourselves so we can step into the second half of our lives with courage and confidence, and so we can model healthier ways of being for our children. So let's dive in and hear from Mia about trauma, healing, and the hope of transformation. So welcome, Mia, to the show. So glad that you can join us today on the Midlife Awakening. And today we're going to be talking about various topics around childhood trauma, how we can help our kids, how we can help ourselves as we sort of come into this age of perimenopause, and it becomes very prevalent that we do have childhood trauma that we can no longer suppress and we want to now heal. So maybe we can start out with you just sharing with us how you got into this line of work and why you're so passionate about it.
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Adelia. Lovely to be here. This is the work I did not want to be in when I started out. I was like, if you think of the hero's journey, I was the reluctant hero. It's like,
All
here's
right.
a challenge. I'm like, no, thanks, not that one. So I actually started off in the late 90s when I was doing my psychology undergrad. I was working in a trauma, like a crisis drop-in center. Which was a pretty rude awakening to trauma work. I was in my early 20s, and I mean, my very first client had watched his entire family get murdered in front of him.
Oh, wow.
So it was all a bit much.
Yeah.
And I ran as far as I could from that line of work as quickly as I could.
Yeah,
And then
because I imagine in the 90s, I think now in 2025, there's a big focus now coming around trauma and being trauma informed and childhood trauma, and there's a big focus. But back in the 90s, it wasn't the case. Wasn't really talked about, was it?
No, and the techniques that we were using at the time, I mean, they're barbaric when I think about it now. We were having people just talk and rehash their trauma over and over again, and which can be re-traumatizing in
Yeah.
itself. It was certainly, I found it traumatic as a therapist. So yeah, I didn't really want to have anything to do with that. So I actually moved far away and ended up doing more life coaching work. So working
Okay.
with parents and helping parents parenting techniques and just working on their own stuff so they're not passing it on to kids. But of course, as my journey went on and the more I did, the more I realized actually it's all coming back to trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is no healing and moving on and parenting effectively and everything unless you've dealt with the trauma that you have. It kind of infiltrates everything you do.
Yeah. It's like that generational trauma, isn't it? Just keeps repeating, the cycle just keeps repeating itself until at some point someone decides it ends here and I'm going to heal this so that I don't, traumatize my kids effectively, because we do, even if we have the best intentions not to, those patterns and those habits seem to just come out of they're more like, not instinctive, but I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, but it just sort of comes out. You've got no control over it. It's part of who you are, really, until you heal it, right?
Yes, yes. Well, we create these internal working models of the people in our lives. So what is a parent? You're creating an internal working model of that as you are being parented as a child.
Yeah.
And then that becomes your model for what is normal. And if your parenting was not normal, then that's your internal model. So you can consciously overcome that, but it requires a bit of work. And then the minute you slip into a kind of unconscious patterns, which happens all the time, then it's like the tape that's playing is that tape that your parents played, and you just do the same thing.
Yeah. I always like to think of it as like you've got these apps running in the background that are, doing updates and doing whatever they're doing in the background. You actually have no control. You have no visibility of them, but they're actually quite important because they're what's driving the whole machine at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah. So some people might think of the word trauma and they associate it with maybe a big event, so a car accident, or someone who's gone to war. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Or some big life-changing event, but it's not necessarily the case. So I'd like to understand, as someone who's worked with trauma for quite a long time, what would you say your definition of trauma is for those people that maybe think that they haven't experienced any trauma? This could be eye-opening for them to realize, oh, actually I have.
Well, I mean, that was me, and that's probably part of my passion for this work is I thought I had a happy childhood.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, everything was fine until I started digging into childhood development, attachment, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, I had an enormous amount of neglect. And not to blame my parents. My parents were essentially teenagers when they had children. They didn't know what they were doing. And if you think about people who are in perimenopause and going into menopause now, when we were parented at that time, the advice that was being given to parents was things like, let the child cry it out. Don't spoil them. Don't give in to those kind of tantrums and things. So we didn't have the emotional nurturing and the containment that this generation are having now. So I suppose my definition of trauma is a little bit broader. Most people, when they think of trauma, are going to think of, the earthquake or the car accident or the sexual assault or something like that.
Yeah.
And certainly those are potentially very traumatic events. But I just broaden that to include things like developmental trauma, which is often the things that didn't happen rather than the things that did.
Yeah.
So the person that wasn't there to hold you when that difficult thing happened, and the baby who was left to cry when they were hungry. There are a lot of things that look really innocent from the outside, but when we really understand childhood development, we look at, trauma is often a life-threatening event, but what is life-threatening to a 6-month-old baby? They're completely dependent on the adult for protection, for food, for safety, for everything. So a parent that's not responding to the needs of that child, that is life-threatening. And it is experienced as a trauma. And just because babies don't remember these things consciously, it doesn't mean it's being remembered in the body and in the way that we're emotionally set up and the way that the nervous system is set up.
Yeah, that's so true. And I heard, I was listening to an interview with Bissell van der Klok. He's written the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a great book.
Brilliant.
And he said something similar. And it really, because up until that point, I was also thinking, oh, the trauma is the event. And how you've just explained it, it's not actually the event. It's no one came to help me.
Yes.
It's that feeling abandoned, or that not, like, no one was there for you. Kind of that's the trauma.
Well, exactly, because actually, as human beings, we're pretty resilient creatures, and we can go through really, really difficult stuff But if we have the support and the containment as we go through that, we do recover. So the lack of recovery comes in when there wasn't somebody to help you through that, where your hurt and your needs were not heard. And that's actually the trauma, is after the fact, what is happening, who's there to support you, how are they supporting you to get through that? Because we can get through difficult stuff. And we do, I don't know a life that doesn't have like really difficult things that have happened.
Yeah, that's so true. Yes. And when he said that, that was so impactful for me. I actually started crying because I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's what the real issue is for me. It's that there was no one there to help me in that situation. I was left alone to handle it on my own. So that can be very impactful. And so a really good thing for people to think about as they look back on their own lives, their own childhoods, and rethink what they've been through, and maybe realizing that they did actually have some form of childhood trauma. But that's okay, because there are ways that we can heal this now with the emergence of attachment theory. One thing that you've mentioned, maybe you could talk a little bit about attachment theory. Maybe not everyone is aware of what that is.
Yeah, so that, started with a psychologist named John Bowlby, who was looking at attachment and what happens. I mean, some of the early things they looked at were children who were going into hospital. And so they were removed from the parents, or the parent was going to hospital, and they were separated. And what was going on with these children? So children would go into hospital and the parents were told not to visit. So you'd have a 2-year-old going in and the parent would come and visit once a week or something. And the child doesn't know what's going on. I mean, that's trauma. And looking at that and what happens when the parent then arrives to visit, and how these children were reacting quite strangely to the parents. So they might cling to them, or they might reject them completely, or, there was this kind of confusion in how they were reconnecting with the parents. And this led on to, a lot of studies around, what happens. There's a very famous experiment. The mother and the baby are in the room together, and then they're playing. A stranger comes into the room. The mother gets up and leaves the room, leaves the baby with the stranger. It's called strange situation. So the mother gets up and leaves the baby with the stranger, and then the mother comes back. And they look at what is the baby's behavior towards the stranger for a start. So being left with someone they don't know at all. And then what happens when the mother comes back? Does the baby go to the mother and get comfort, which would be a natural response, is that it would be very upset to be left with a complete stranger. When the mother comes back, you'd still be upset. You climb onto the mother's lap, get some support, and recover, right? Nice, secure attachment. But what happens with babies who are insecurely attached is either they become incredibly clingy and inconsolable, or they may reject the mother completely when she returns. And they don't want to be comforted by her. They may actually even turn to the stranger for attention and comfort. So there's a whole branch of psychology that's developed from looking at these, and what happens to these children who are securely attached or insecurely attached as they grow up, and how that then plays out into their adult relationships, into their friendships. And it's incredibly impactful if we haven't learned to attach securely, don't trust people.
And it tends to manifest in our adult life more so than at any other time. And what would you say, what are some examples of this, of how it would manifest in our lives as adults?
Well, you see things like there's two different kinds of insecure attachment. So on the one hand, you would have adults who will have, like, we call it like positive affect, but it's not real, right? So you're pretending to be happy, to be okay. Meanwhile, the negative emotions are all squashed up to pretend not to have those. So often people are very compliant, people pleasing, often performers, people who are getting the straight A's, doing really well. These are the insecure attached kids often that we miss because they do really well at school and all the adults love them and they seem to just be, thriving.
Yeah.
But actually they're just pushing down all of that negative affect, and then something will happen, they'll explode, and then they'll feel so guilty and embarrassed and, try to pretend that didn't happen. They don't understand why it did happen. Obviously, you can't keep everything down forever.
Yes.
So that's on the one hand. And then, of course, that plays out in relationships because you can get into abusive relationships because you're people pleasing and you're doing what the other person wants. And a lot of abusive partners will take advantage of that.
That makes sense, yeah.
Of course, plays out into parenting and friendships and everything as well. But then on the other side, you have more the children who end up in therapy because they're acting out. So the negative emotions very much are there on the surface. They're trying to get attention, and what they're really trying to do is actually keep the parent close and safe, so they feel safe. But they know they can be really coy and engaging 1 minute and then completely losing the plot the next minute. And that constant changing is keeping the parents' attention on them all the time.
Yeah.
So again, that plays out in relationships in all sorts of ways with, adult tantrums, if you think of it like that. And, being really sweet and then pushing away and pulling close. And
so in both scenarios, it's basically what it comes down to is seeking that attention, whether it's in a positive way by being the overperformer, overachieving, look at me, I'm doing really well, aren't you proud of me?
Yeah.
Or the opposite, where it's I'm going to lash out, I'm going to be aggressive, I'm going to be all the bad things because I want your attention, I need your help. So that seems to be like the core.
That is
needing,
the core.
yeah.
The core is safety,
Yeah.
So your attachment strategies, and that's what they are. They're strategies to keep the parent's attention on you so that you can stay safe.
Yeah.
So it's not that we would behave like that all the time, but under threat, those strategies come out. And the child has learned what kind of parent they have and how to behave to keep the parent's attention on them. So some you need to perform, for some you need to throw your toys.
Yeah.
But you're trying to stay safe. So it's not bad. It's not bad behavior. And this is because I work a lot with parents and with children. I'm like, there's no bad behavior. There's information, there's communication, there's feedback. And that child has learned to behave like that to keep your attention. So the whole family system needs to shift if you want to shift that.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's talking about our own children and, how our trauma can affect them. So once you realize that, you've got these patterns, you've had this traumatic event or something, this trauma from your childhood, how can this prevent you from showing up for your own children? So how do we make sure that we are still showing up for our kids, even though we know we're on a healing journey and we don't want to pass that trauma on to them? We want the cycle to end, but we're still on our journey.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, childhood trauma is going to interfere with your relationship with your children, like it interferes with all relationships, because it's really difficult to be present. The whole thing about trauma is the way that it's stored in the brain, and to try and keep us safe, we get triggered, the brain's triggering us to notice certain sights, sounds, smells, feelings in the environment. It's like, oh, I noticed that. That I linked to that earlier trauma. And then it's starting to trigger those past memories into the present moment, which means you can't be present, which is really what our children need.
Yeah.
They need our presence, they need safety, they need relationship with us. And
Yeah.
that's really the whole of parenting.
Yeah.
So if you can't be present, that's going to interfere with your children's attachment to you, with their own sense of safety, and everything that's going on in that relationship.
Yeah.
So, of course, it takes time to deal with your own trauma. And it's not that, oh, now this has happened, now your children are ruined forever or something. And this is where I can talk about attachment strategies again, is that the strategy, the secure attachment, is not necessarily the best one, because children who have the A or the C, which are the other versions of the insecure attachment, if they earn the B, secure attachment, by dealing with their trauma and everything, they actually have more flexibility in the world, because they've got more strategies to draw from in different situations. The problem is, if you're stuck in one strategy, then that's all you've got. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if you've, not been the perfect parent and your children don't have a secure strategy. I don't want parents to think like, oh, I've messed this up, it's all doomed. It really isn't. Yeah.
Okay.
And the more you work on your stuff and the more you come to a place of wholeness and presence, your children will go on that journey with you.
Right.
And as you heal, they heal.
Yeah. So really it comes back to that, like, you lead by example. So yes, you may have caused some, because in effect, we're not perfect as parents. We don't know what we're doing. No, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But that's really true. And that is comforting to know that, like, if you go on this journey and you let them see you go on this journey, I think that's probably the important part, is that they see you going on this journey and that you're vulnerable enough to say, I'm not perfect, but I know I'm not perfect and I'm trying to heal myself. If they can see that, and then they do get those other strategies. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And a lot of, when we look at parenting and people want to be perfect parents, and there's actually no such thing.
Yeah.
The research they've done looking at, parenting, how much of parenting is what we would call good parenting. And it's probably about 30%. The best parents are getting it right about 30% of the time. And the rest, the other 70%, is what we call rupture and repair. So you're messing it up, and then you're going and saying sorry, or you're fixing it in some way, or you're reconnecting. And that's actually the magic. The magic is in those times where you've messed it up, and then you go and make it right.
Yeah. And they learn from that, don't they? Because they learn from you, because they see you're not perfect, and they see, oh, well, you've made the mistake and this is how you're fixing it. And the importance of that, going in and fixing it, I think that's really impactful. Wow, that's really just hit me quite. Yes. Yeah. Because you don't think about that when you're in it. When you're in it, you're like, you just want to do the best job that you can. And I don't think we're compassionate enough with ourselves. I don't think we give ourselves the space and the permission to not be perfect. And that's really important, I think, as a parent's journey, is to realize that's
human.
yeah, like, your imperfection is actually good for them, as long as you're learning from it and you're making it right, or attempting to make it right. They're learning too.
Yes,
because learning doesn't just happen in schools; it happens in everyday life.
Well, more of it is happening in everyday life.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, exactly.
What are the important things you want to learn? And part of that is, what does it mean to be human? And if you're perfect, you're playing the perfect role, you're not giving your children permission to be imperfect. So then they have the pressure on themselves to be something that is absolutely impossible. So when they see you being human and flawed and messing up and having bad days, they're like, oh, okay, that's normal. That internal working model is going, yeah, all right. I'm like my mum. I'm like a bit of a mess sometimes. That's fine.
And that's okay. It's okay. We're a work in progress all the time, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for that. That's been, I mean, I don't know if anyone else listening has really felt that, but that has really just hit a chord for me, because I know that I do I beat myself up a lot around how I parent and am I being a good enough parent. But I do always try to, when I see that I messed up, I always do try to make right. So that gives me some comfort to know that I'm doing it, I am doing it right.
Yes.
Not perfect, but right,
Yes.
following the right strategy. So why else is it important for us to heal our childhood trauma besides the attachment?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we step away from children at the moment and just think about yourself, childhood, any adverse childhood experiences can lead to long-term chronic health conditions and psychological conditions. So the research that I've drawn for that is something called ACEs research by Felitti and colleagues, which I'm sure you will come across.
Yes. So maybe just to explain for the viewers, the listeners quick, is so ACEs is like a score. It's a questionnaire that you can do. And if you score certain points, that it sort of basically says that you've had an adverse childhood, you've suffered adverse childhood experience, if I'm correct.
So, what Felitti and his colleagues were actually looking at, where they started out, was with women in weight loss clinics who were losing an enormous amount of weight, but then they would go away and put it all back on again. It's like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And started digging into that a bit and discovered that most of these women had childhood trauma, often childhood sexual trauma, and that was affecting their ability to heal in terms of weight loss. And they then expanded that out. I think they studied 17,000 people, and I think it was in the California area. And they looked at the medical records of these people, and then they gave them this ACEs questionnaire. So it's adverse childhood experiences. Did they have any trauma, any neglect, any dysfunctional family things, a parent who's gone to prison or domestic violence? We're looking at things like that. And the higher the ACE score, so how many adverse childhood experiences you'd have had, was correlated to higher risk of pretty much every chronic health condition we know. So that's cancer, diabetes, heart disease, all of the big ones.
Yeah, that's right. There is a link between those two.
And such a high correlation. I mean, we're talking a higher correlation than, say, between smoking and lung cancer. That it's just absolutely insane that everybody doesn't know about this.
Yeah.
And looking at somebody, say, with an ACE score of 6 or higher is likely to die 20 years earlier than somebody with an ACE score of 0.
Wow.
I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, that's insane. And that's an insane number, yeah.
I often hesitate to bring it up because people become terrified then. They're like, well, I had a parent who went to prison and one who was an alcoholic, and there was domestic violence and there was this, and so I'm going to die. Which is not the conclusion that we want people to come to. The thing is to know that, if you know that about yourself, that you've had these difficult experiences in childhood, it's really, really important to actually go and address that. I meet so many people who they're terrified of addressing it. They just like, I'm not opening that box. I put that stuff in a box in my mind. I've locked it up. I'm never opening it. I don't want to go there. I don't want to think about it. But you don't have a choice really, because it is affecting you. It's affecting your relationships. It's affecting your health. You need to address it. And I really would encourage people to look into, and I know we said we were going to talk about EMDR, which I'll explain in a moment, but there are therapies like EMDR where you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to sit and talk about and rehash that trauma, because so many people who have trauma feel enormous amounts of shame. And it's really difficult to start that journey because they're like, I'm going to have to sit in front of someone and I'm going to be judged and they're going to hear about these terrible things and I don't want to say it. I don't even want to think it. But just to encourage people that there are ways of dealing with that where you don't have to do that. You don't have to be vulnerable within yourself, but you don't have to be that vulnerable with your therapist or heavy working with that you have to talk about all of that.
Yeah.
So there is hope.
Yeah. Because not everybody is comfortable. I know for myself, I love talk therapy. That has always been my go-to. But I know other people that are, they don't see, they would never try it. They would never, because they're not comfortable with it. So it's good to know that there are other modalities out there that they can use that can still be helpful for them.
Yeah.
And I always like to, and I'd like to get your view on this because, earlier we talked about you started out in therapy where people were talking about their issues and it was just rehashing. And so I've come to the conclusion in the last 2 years that therapy is really great for validating an experience that you may have gone through where we don't get the validation ourselves, or we don't give ourselves the validation. We question ourselves, we doubt ourselves. But really, it's not going to heal you. You have to take the next step. And there's so many different healing modalities out there, like EMDR, that will actually help you heal. And you will see the difference between that and going to traditional talk therapy. Not to say that traditional talk therapy is not helpful. It is, and it has its place. But if you want to heal, there are other modalities. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about what EMDR is, how does it work, and how it can help.
Well, I'm still coming from what you just said, because that was exactly my experience, was years and years of therapy. And like, okay, well, now I know that this was actually a traumatic experience that I've had as a child. I understand that. We brought it to the light. We talked about it, but I don't feel better. I don't feel okay.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, I feel worse because now it's all on the surface instead of hidden away.
Yeah.
And that really was my journey into EMDR. Was partly that and partly some very young children that I know who, strange enough, I know 3 young children who experienced witnessing their mothers being murdered by their fathers.
Wow.
And at very, very young ages, 2, 3 years old.
Oh my gosh.
How do we treat them? What do we do? So I ended up doing my dissertation on EMDR for infants and toddlers with trauma.
Oh wow.
Because it doesn't require the verbal side.
Yes,
We don't have to be cognitive. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to talk about it, and we can still process that. But also for myself, having been through the talk therapy and finding that I wasn't really going anywhere with that. The EMDR was absolutely amazing, just in a very short space of time, taking that and something, if you think about a distressing experience that you had, even if you just think about it now, you bring it to mind, you find you start tearing up, or your heart starts racing, or you're having a visceral experience of that, even though you may have talked about it for years in therapy. But that is still there. And what the EMDR does, and I literally watch this, it's like magic in front of me. It's somebody who's having a really, really strong response to something that happened. And within an hour and a half of doing this EMDR, then I feel fine about that now. We'll scale it on a scale of 0 to 10. Like, how distressed are you feeling when you start? And they may be at an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in level of distress. And by the time we finish, they're at a 1, which is a huge.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Okay. And my next question is going to be, what is it about the perimenopause phase that tends to make us feel this, well, I have anyway, this need for healing becomes louder and it's like you can't suppress it anymore.
Yes. So I think of that in terms of the window of tolerance, which is a term coined by Daniel Siegel, looking at, like, we all, in terms of our nervous system, we have capacity to take on so much, right, at any given time.
Yeah.
It changes from day to day. It changes from hour to hour. Like, how big is your window of tolerance right now? Or what is it going to take to push you over the edge? And some days it takes a lot to push you over the edge. You're like, yeah, I've got this. Okay, bring it on. And then another day, it's like, I don't know, somebody uses your favorite cup and you fall into a meltdown. So it's like, okay, well, what is your window of tolerance at the moment? And when we go into perimenopause and we've got all of that hormonal stuff happening. Think about a teenager, when they're going through adolescence and how volatile they are, and every little thing is a huge drama, and it's the same sort of thing. We've got all of this hormonal change going on, and our window of tolerance is just smaller. So if you've got childhood trauma, if you've got all of these things sitting in the background, your ability to regulate your nervous system, to keep that stuff repressed, it is just not as it's just not as easy as it is when you don't have that going on. It's like, think about how your window of tolerance will shrink if you're hungry and you didn't sleep well last night, and maybe something happened this morning that wasn't great, and then you didn't get your cup of coffee because you were running late, and all of those things add up. So it's like that. We've just got this extra thing that's adding a stress to our nervous system and making us more vulnerable to those things that are happening under the surface anyway.
Okay, that makes sense. That does make a lot of sense. Because I've definitely felt that in the last 2 years as I start to enter in perimenopause. Things that I thought weren't an issue have now become an issue, and I want to deal with it and, move on and change and heal and grow. So I can definitely resonate with that. So now trying to start a healing journey can be quite overwhelming. So you get to this point where I've identified I've got some childhood trauma. I can see how it's showing up in my adult life and how it's negatively impacting my life. I want to change that. I want to heal this. We've talked about a couple of things. We've talked about therapy. We've talked about some other modalities that can help. But it can be quite overwhelming for someone who wants to start on their journey. So what would your suggestion be? Like where can they make a start? How do they get on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm biased because I'm a therapist, so say, get yourself a good therapist. And it may be that, but that may not be your thing. Everybody is different, and your journey is going to be unique to you. So for some people, it may be more of a physical journey. They need some good massage, or maybe they need some psychedelics. I don't know. There's something that works for them. My go-to would be to start with a therapist. Start with someone who's going to listen, who's going to help you unpack, like, what are all the things that are going on here? Is it childhood trauma, or is it actually something else? Or have I just let my brain slide? Where am I? It's such a confusing time, and when you've got hormones kicking in, and the brain fog is there, and everything, and it's really
everything else.
It's difficult to go, okay, is this like just general stress that I'm dealing with right now because I've got young children and aging parents and, all of those life things? Or is this something from the past that I need to actually dredge up and deal with? What's going on? And you may be able to do that if you've got a partner or a really good friend who can help you unpick it. You can journal. That's another good way of.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
I like to have somebody to bounce things off.
Yeah.
I find that really helpful to talk to somebody else and have them go, yeah, but actually, what you said just now doesn't really fit with what you're saying right now. Just call me out on some of those things.
It's just about having that validation at the end of the day, isn't it? It's that everybody has this inner need to be heard.
Yes. So
that's where the therapy can come in and really be helpful. And if therapy is not your thing, I think something else that you mentioned is pretty good, is feeling safe in your body. And I know in the book, The Body Keeps Score, he talks a lot about this, about feeling safe in your body again, because maybe in childhood, that's where the trauma stems from. It's not feeling safe in your body. So how can you make yourself feel safe? What strategies can you introduce in your day-to-day that will help you make you feel safe in your body again and regulate your nervous system.
Yeah, and just for people to know, like, you're not going crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really difficult time. It's a really difficult time. And for everybody, that's going to hit you differently. But you are going to make it out the other side.
Yeah.
And if you can see it as an opportunity where things are coming up, they're not coming up to torture you. They're coming up so that you can heal that, so that you can move forward, so that the second half of your life, because there's still another half to go, the second half of your life can be magical.
It's about growth at the end of the day. It's about growing, and growth is it's not comfortable. It's, this depiction of like this healing journey is going to be wonderful and there's rainbows. No, it's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable at times. But when you come out on the other end, you're going to come out a different person and a better, more whole person that can live the second half of your life can be far more fulfilling than the first half, potentially, depending on your situation, right?
Yeah, and you can think of it also as a gift that you're giving to the next generation, and the one after that, and the one after that. That's going to echo down through time. That is the gift that you are passing on, is that gift of wholeness, of presence that is possible for everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you today.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to look you up and find you, where do they go?
So probably my website's the best place to start. That is transformationalparenting.guru, Guru. Everything's on there, contact details and bits and pieces and what I do and how I work, and it's all there. So that's probably the best place to find me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all those things as well. All those things are on my website too.
Great. And we'll link those down in the show notes so people can find you that way too. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, so great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciated this.
Thanks a lot.
Wow, what a powerful conversation. My biggest takeaway today, and maybe yours too, is that it's actually okay to mess up as a parent. In fact, it can even be a gift. Because when our kids see that we're human and imperfect, and then watch us take responsibility and repair, they learn resilience and new ways of handling life's challenges. That reminder really lifted a weight off my shoulders, and I hope it did for you too. And I also love what Mia shared about EMDR, knowing there are therapies that don't require us to retell our trauma over and over again, but can still help us release the pain and find peace, is such a reassuring thought. It's a reminder that healing is not only possible, but it can be gentler than we imagine. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you more than you know, and I truly hope this episode resonated with you. If it did, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with someone who might need to hear it too. This podcast is a true labor of love, and it means the world to me to be able to share it with you every week. If I could ask just one small thing in return, it's this. Please take a moment to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps more than you know in keeping it going and helping it reach others on their healing journey. I truly cannot do this without you. We're only just getting started, so make sure to click that follow button or the little bell so you're notified when the new episode drops. If you want to stay connected between episodes, come follow me on my healing journey on Instagram or TikTok. You'll find the links in the show notes or just search the Midlife Awakening. Until next week, be kind to yourself and take care of your heart. And remember, it's never too late to begin again. Bye for now.